2 long weeks, welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean Mekinda.
And I'm a human baby.
And that means one thing. We're returning strong. And we're returning with some goddamn weeaboo shit.
The kingdom of anime calls to us and we fucking answer.
But we return with an anime twist. For you see, this was not suggested by the one of us who loves anime so fucking much. No. This was suggested by me.
I thought you were about to call me out so hard by saying this was not suggested by the one of us who loves anime so fucking much she's moving to Japan because of it. which I mean would be right, but I'm glad you didn't say it.
No. I'm not here to. I'm not coming off that hot on our return. You know, I want to reintroduce ourselves very cordially and nice before we just like burn our past. You know.
Fair enough. But yeah, no, this is a Sean pick. We have both seen this before, but Sean introduced this to me back during our college roomie days.
Yes. So if you are unfamiliar, we are watching an anime called Parasyte the Maxim, based off a manga just called Parasyte. Way back when I was a wee boy reading manga, I stumbled across this and loved it. I read like the first 3 or 4 volumes. I never finished it because I think it went on hiatus or something, or like the final 2 volumes are hard to find. I don't really know why I didn't finish it, but I didn't. Cut to 6-8 years later, and it turns out that they made an anime out of it. It aired on Adult Swim with the dub, but we watched the original sub, I think, on Hulu way back when. Yeah. And I absolutely loved it. It lived up to all of my expectations from the manga that I read way back when. And so I've been itching since then to go back and rewatch it. You know, I have some better media literacy. I have some more awareness as to what's going on. And I was hoping it would hold up just as well. And I can safely say it absolutely fucking does. This anime rules so goddamn much.
Is Parasyte the Maxim a perfect anime? No. Does Parasyte the Maxim necessarily have the best dialogue? No. Does Parasyte the Maxim have weird pacing at times? Yes. Is Parasyte the Maxim an absolute fucking all-timer? Of course. So, you know, we'll get into what like attracts us to the show so much, despite like I think safely saying like having pretty well documented flaws in a lot of ways. I know this anime like within the weeb community is a little divisive, which is one of the reasons I was so curious to go back to it, because yeah, it was a similar position. I had not read the manga as like a wee boy or anything, but Sean was like, hey, actually I don't even think like you introduced it on purpose. I think I just walked in on you watching this and just like sat down, and like then Kang sat down and the whole house was watching the whole thing because you were on like episode 2.
It's possible. I mean, we've done that before. That wouldn't have been the first time that had happened.
Yeah. But like I was also really taken with it and really enjoyed it. But at the time, I was not the disgusting weeaboo trash that I was now. I was still kind of dipping my toes into the anime world after rejecting my true desire for so long, you know, to really embrace it like the horrible garbage person that I am. So I had not seen all that much anime when we had first watched it. And part of me wondered as I've gone on and I've thought about it more and watched more shows and just been more like in tune with the online anime community or what have you. I'd been thinking about it because I thought about the show a lot, which is, you know, one of my metrics for like a great show or a great film or a great what have you, is that I keep coming back to it. And I did keep coming back to this, like memorable scenes, memorable characters, memorable themes, memorable moments, all that stuff. But part of me was also wondering, was I just so taken with this because I hadn't really seen anything like it before? And I think it is still a pretty unique anime, but I mean in particular that I had seen some anime, but like not much beyond just like shonen schlock. Like I knew shows like this existed, like more serious, like adult, like seinen sort of shows. So I knew they existed, but I'd never seen them. And so I kind of like didn't trust myself. I'm like, was I just so impressed because it was so unique? And is it really that unique? And is it really that impressive? Like I too had been wanting to go back to it. So the Horsecast presented a perfect opportunity. We had this on our list of like stuff we wanted to do an episode on since like the early days.
This was like number 3 on our list for a long fucking time. But anime's hard to get around to watching just because it's a big ask. And when we had 2 weeks off, we're like, hey, you know what? This is going to be the perfect time to present itself. We fucking took it. So before we really get into this, though, I do kind of want to structure how I would recommend this anime, because if you haven't watched it, there's some things that I think is worth mentioning before you start. If you are not a fan of body horror, skip it. It is a very body horror focused one. It's a very bloody anime as well. It's very adult in that way. It's adult in a lot of themes, but not in like the sex type of way. It's much more like look into the void looks into you. But this time it's gonna come out happy. I promise. We're gonna talk about good things. We're not returning to the void just yet. So just be aware that it's a very introspective anime in that regard. It's very bloody. It's very body horror. So if any of those things are a turnoff, you're not going to like it. The other thing, and this is important, there are 2 hurdles to getting into this anime. Number 1 is the terrible intro song. It was dated the day it came out. It is this terrible screamo nightmare thing. Just power through it. If it's on Netflix, use that skip intro button liberally. It is terrible. I played through it once. I watched this with Sam because there's at one point where they go, "A human baby," and it is the funniest thing in the world. But you never want to hear it again. You skip it. Don't do it. Don't watch it.
In defense of the intro, a lot of anime, like intro songs, follows very typical, very formulaic sort of fashion. This is definitely one of the more unique anime intros I have seen. They tried. Yeah. Keyword being try.
Yeah, I you know what? Watch it once. Let me update that to say watch it once. It's interesting.
It's a good meme. Watch it once, if only for a human baby.
Yes, absolutely. The other hurdle is the first 2 to 3 episodes are a little rocky. This is where I coined the term the episode 2 problem of anime, which is if you have an anime that's going to get into serious themes, a lot of times it has to have at least one episode that is real horny. And episode 2 is it here. You can see even in the early episodes that it's going to get to some interesting places, but episode 1 and 2 both have some issues. Like they are bad slice of life anime at that point, which the slice of life element of the show is a through line throughout the entire thing. It's a very important element of the show, but it's very evident in the first few episodes, and it does not yet have the body horror to contrast it, and so it just feels awkward and unwieldy. So get through the first few episodes. Episode 3, you're going to get into a little bit more of the bloody body horror stuff where it starts to pick up a little bit. The music is going to be off-putting there as well because they use dubstep for the first few fight scenes. The dubstep gets dropped later. I promise you just need to make it past like episode 4 and the show turns nigh perfect. Through all of its flaws, it's perfect. The first few episodes are just a little rough.
Yeah, like the first few episodes are like maybe the only serious flaw with the show that actively detract from my enjoyment of it. Like, yeah, sure, it's a little annoying how often Murano asks, like, are you really Shinichi? She does that like once an episode for like a stretch of like 14 fucking episodes. There's some like minor stuff here and there, but none of it is really a big deal. Those first couple episodes, like, I was a little worried going back, like, oh no, I was right, like it doesn't hold up. And it's not even like they're the worst episodes in the world. Like Sean says, there are you could see the genesis of where it's eventually going to go, but it definitely takes a few episodes to find its footing, I think is the best way to put it. And because when it finds that footing, it takes off fucking running.
Oh God, yeah. This show is, people talk about absolutely bingeable shows, and this is a show that you can blink and like 8 episodes have passed. And like, I think part of that is attributed to the fact that the pacing of the show is kind of weird. There is a section later on, and I'm not going to spoil what that section is right now, but it is pretty much the longest arc, I guess you could call it, of the series, and it goes on for like 3 or 4 episodes. But they are still blink and you'll miss it episodes. Like, they go by so fucking fast, despite the fact that they still feel longer than everything else in the show. Like, that weird pacing almost makes it go by faster. It's a very weird show in how it's effective in that regard.
It's weird pacing, but it's not bad pacing. And I think that, like, I do want to talk about the pacing a little more in spoilers, because I think there are specific moments.
Oh, we have a lot to talk about in spoilers. Don't get me wrong. I'm just prefacing this, you know?
Yeah, sure. But while we're talking about more generalities, I think one thing that's interesting about the show's pacing is how it's not like a Breaking Bad sort of show, or even like some other anime that are more. I've heard a few like directors of anime even talk about how they wanted their shows to feel more Western in their pacing. And that's usually this very traditional idea of like cause and effect. This leads to this, which leads to that, which has this consequence, et cetera, that naturally leads you through a story. Breaking Bad's a really good example of this, and, you know, which is kind of the gold standard for bingeable TV, like, can't put it down. This is not that, even though this is a 24 episode show and I watched it in 2 sittings. But I think what makes the pacing work is that even though, like, there isn't one like cause and effect through line necessarily, the show is really good at presenting the interesting ideas in each of its vignettes quickly, effectively, and with strong visuals and presentation, and then moving on to the next thing, which is not only interesting in its own right, but also, even if it's not directly related to what happened in the previous episode, feels like an escalation. Like, they are taking the drama, they are taking the core conceit, the drama of Shinichi Izumi is a regular high school boy who has this creepy fucking murder parasite in his arm, and he gets involved in a bunch of shit because of it. They push that in so many different directions, in terms of the action, in terms of the character dynamics at home, in terms of the character dynamics at school. They just keep pushing it. It never feels like the show is repeating itself like a lot of episodic stories do. And I think so that's what makes it, even though like the main plot, like there is no main goal that Shinichi's really working toward for most of the show, except for like survive, I guess. But even so, each of those mini stories feel impactful in their own right, because the show is not afraid to go places, which we will talk about, and when it goes places, it never does it the same way twice.
The cause and effect isn't so much like in the story itself, but in the themes, because each time something happens, it builds on a theme that you already had established and takes it and inverts it in a new way. It basically adds a new side. So like you start off with this coin, and by the end you have a 20-sided dice of this theme impacted this, and you can kind of see where every theme led into one another and how it shifted. And so like you're drawn to the next episode, not because, oh no, fucking Parasyte A is about to unleash a spirit bomb on the entire earth. What will happen next? But because it's like, this Parasyte said something that recontextualized everything else, and we're clearly going to be building on that for the next episode.
Yeah. I guess as far as like recommendations, I would basically, if you can stomach the gore and the body horror, I would basically recommend this to anyone. I think it's a great story. Again, with both those caveats that Sean mentioned, I completely agree.
I would also say that it's not even that gory or bad. Like, cartoon violence, I think, has such a distance from real world violence. Like, if you can't stomach The Thing, I get it. The Thing is a very weird, horrifying movie. It is not Parasyte. Parasyte is, like, it still oozes that cartooniness to it.
Yeah, like Like, do you weirdly think that Migi is kind of cute in parts?
Oh my God, yes, multiple times. Migi's adorable.
Like he like, it's kind of disturbing when you think about it, but like, you know, sometimes he walks around on like his little feet and like, you know, makes a little man out of his hand. Yeah, but then other times, like especially at the beginning, before they have that character relationship, there is more of that twisted body horror stuff. But my ultimate recommendation is that, like, if you like Metal Gear Solid at all, if you like that combination of sort of over the top action insanity and like really navel gazy preponderance of themes, you will enjoy Parasyte.
I mean, I would just recommend this to almost anyone, because I think that even if you don't get involved in the themes, like I didn't as a child because I was an idiot, as I have mentioned many a time on this podcast, it's still a very enjoyable romp to go from point A to point B and just kind of see what happens and explore the ideas of the show. I think that, like, I will say, we were talking a little bit in the pre-discussion that the ending can be a little divisive, and I think that that's really where it stems from, because I can see that if you are just not engaging with the themes on as much of a level, I can see why the ending would be a little weird to you. But I think that the ending, if you are going through this with like themes on the forefront, the ending is very impactful.
Yeah, I love the ending. I always have. I'm going to plant my flag in the sand right there. And, you know, we'll talk more about why.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember how much I felt about the ending last time I watched it, which I think says a lot. But I absolutely loved it this time. So I'm very much on board with everything that happens in the ending. I mean, I'm on board with pretty much everything that happens in this anime.
And also, like, if you are someone who's put off by a divisive ending, one thing that I should say is that, like, pretty much when we say the ending, like, what we mean is the last episode, and it's not like the complaints I see are never like that it's horrible, just that it's kind of weird. And it is kind of weird, but it fits with the show, like you said, if you are watching with theme on the brain, which I think is why, if you are more just like getting swept up in the story, it can seem weird and kind of hard to jive with. But you know, it's working. I promise you. You know, take it from you, old Daddy Jackson.
He's a master, you know.
I've covered books, you know.
Oh, man, we should talk about spoilers. We should actually get into the meat and potatoes of this thing.
There's plenty to talk about. I agree.
So before we do, as always, if you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. Please tell friends. It's really the only way we grow. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/BADHcast. Follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. Next week, we're going to be kicking off a little bit of a more positive spin for a bit here. We want to focus on things that aren't dark and terrible, or at least are dark and terrible, but in ways that end with positive themes. Next week, we're not talking about anything dark and terrible. We're talking about the first two Bill and Ted movies. Because the day that the episode will go live, Bill and Ted Face the Music comes out, and I'm very curious to see if those hold up. I watched them as a child. I just watched Mikey Newman's video on Bill and Ted. I'm very interested in rewatching them. So,
I guess meanwhile, I have never seen Bill and Ted. I know that it's Keanu Reeves and some other guy. They time travel. And it's the 80s. That's about it.
You get about half of it. You're almost there. Don't worry about it. For now, though, let's dig into some spoilers. Where do we want to start here, Jackson?
Where do we want to start here? Shit. I mean, it's always tricky to talk about a series, especially one like this that's so... It's so dense. There's so much going on in every single shot. But I guess we can go back to the we can tie the pacing thing in a neat little bow real quick. 'Cause yeah, like one of the things that was interesting to me on the rewatch was there are a lot of big, impactful moments, particularly when it introduces early on the plot point that one of his teachers at school, who ends up becoming like a really interesting, really prominent character, Tamiya Ryoko, she is a parasite, and it seems like they're going to try and milk that drama for all it's worth. Like, oh, we're going to have a teacher and his, love interest is in the other class that she teaches, and that's bad news and all this stuff. She's not in that school anymore by like episode 4. Like I was surprised at like how explosive that got, and like, all right, moving on.
She is in and out within one, maybe 2 episodes. Like, I genuinely don't remember if it was 1 or 2 episodes. If it was 2 episodes, it's because she was like in for half of one, out on the back half of the other.
Yeah.
Like, total screen time of 1 episode in the school. She does come back as other characters and is it almost is not the emotional heart of the show, but like is the secondary level to that.
Yeah, like she's kind of the foil to Shinichi and Migi, which is kind of the central relationship. And one thing that I want to praise while we're thinking about it is that like how good of like a buddy cop routine they have, and like how meaningful their development is, and how the fact that like it's not just like these characters are impacting each other like psychologically or emotionally, but because it's like a body horror thing, there is that physical element. And I think that's one thing that the show does really well, is that it explores a lot of these ideas about like, you know, what it means to be human, what is the purpose of like life on Earth, like these questions that don't have any real definitive answers, and like just does a wonderful job like showing how blurry that line is and making that relationship literal of like, you know, at some point, as Shinichi grows more cold and Mii grows more human, it's not just because they've been hanging out with each other. It's because there is literally more Migi inside of him as the show goes on. And that's what the show wants you to think about. At what point can you even call them separate entities?
I could talk about the body horror and relationships within this show for a long time. In fact, I have written a piece about body horror and relationships over on 25yearslatersite.com that I'm rather proud of. I think it's interesting.
It's good stuff. You should read it. You should link in the show notes. Go do it.
So I could spend a long time just kind of discussing everything that this leads into. But I think in general, just one of the most effective ways to navel gaze about humanity is to have it so that the navel comes up to meet you as opposed to you bending down to meet your navel. And what I mean by that is twist your fucking humanity into knots. Make it disgusting and unrecognizable, and make like the viewer unpack what that means to themselves. I think body horror is one of the most interesting themes and ideas and analogies that media presents to us, just because it can mean so many things. And in this show, body horror means so many things. For example, even when Jackson's talking about like the removal of separate identities from Migi and Shinichi is in itself a theme that body horror deals with all the time. Where does one entity end and another begin? Like, that is something that I touched on in my article talking about relationships. You know, when you develop a relationship, even if it's not strictly speaking someone bonded to your right arm, the sense of identity of one being one person, one being the other starts to lose each other, and you become one through that just interaction. This is something that is present in almost all body horror, and something that is very fascinating within the show. It also does a wonderful job of exploring trauma, because trauma can very easily be represented as just some horrible, grotesque growth on your body, and it's something that you slowly have to get used to. And like, I don't know about you, but there's little more traumatic I can think of than knowing that a snake burrowed into my skin and ate my arm and replaced it. So like, there's your trauma. Granted, we get into the trauma of his lost mom, and we start to see his own body deform as a result of that. And there's a lot of ideas and themes around that. I mean, again, I could spend literally the rest of this episode talking about the themes that this show presents through its usage of body horror. And I probably will chime in here and there to be like, oh, you see, this also applies in this way. But I don't want to do that, because I think there's a lot of other interesting things to talk about as well.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to waste the whole episode banging on about this again, so I'll make it brief. But like, the thing about this show that resonated with me so hard this time is that like, I have never seen a show that presented the experience of losing a parent in a way that felt like identical. like 100% identical to the way that I felt when I lost my dad. No, I love it because it is so literal. You know, he has a hole in his heart. He keeps like clutching at it. In some ways, it's kind of cringe because that's how anime is. But like it's so on point. It's so perfect. It's like Metal Gear Solid in that way, that like you either buy into the fact that it's like kind of bold-facedly is what it is about, or you don't. And I do. But like just that whole experience that Shinichi has of like seeing death everywhere, feeling cold and emotionless, feeling unsure if you're a monster or like if everyone around you like just doesn't get it. Like that was it. Like I can't speak to it for everyone else, but like if you ever wondered about like what my psyche was like circa 2018, it's this show, you know, but with monster.
Which is why body horror is so effective. Just as an aside, you know, it's almost like the monsters are us, and that's what makes it good. I'm sorry, I genuinely love body horror as a concept, in case that is not abundantly clear, because I think it is so fascinating just how much it can represent, and like just the betrayal and pain and trauma and identity and relationships. God, body horror is, pun kind of intended, the most malleable fucking theme, and it's so good for it. God damn.
Yeah, because I was poking fun a little, like, oh, it makes it literal, but I think that's what makes it, like, the fact that it is so in your face about it, like subtle, and not that this show lacks subtlety in like all areas, but in this particular area, like that it is so on point. Like I think subtlety's kind of overrated sometimes. Like the fact that it really does, that it takes these ideas. And I was thinking about your piece a lot when I was watching this, like no joke, like the way that it relates to, because of how many different avenues it explores, not just within Shinichi's body, but like how that relationship with Migi, you know, impacts the maternal relationship. You know, there's the parallels between Shinichi's relationship with his mom and then the stuff going on with Tamura Ryoko, and the romantic relationship element of it, which you wrote quite a bit about. Like that show, it's not an accident that you could argue that this show is in large part like a romance, and that has a lot to do with it.
Shinichi has like a pheromone that just makes women flock to him.
It's funny. That is like the one thing. If we're talking about like whether or not the show felt dated, the way the show wrote its women on the whole felt very 80s to me, even by anime standards.
The women in the show are not treated well. Sam pointed this out, and I do think it's just worth mentioning just because it's her experience. She's a woman. She has every validity to point this out, that women in the show get brutalized on average more and worse than men do. Like the way parasites often feed is presented as men preying on women, which yes is a interesting idea unto itself, but also can be very uncomfortable when you just kind of recognize that like a lot of women in this show just die.
Yeah. It's not an accident. It's part of a trend that like it is Shinichi's mother and not his father that gets fucking got, right?
It's
like,
definitely a very male-centric show, which I mean I would argue is probably its biggest flaw, because like it falls into a lot of those male-centric show tropes where if someone dies, it's more than likely a love interest or someone who is his mother or something like that. Like that is like it takes this and goes interesting places with it that does get very navel gazy, but also, I mean, y'all do better.
Yeah, I think the stuff with the mom, like I think the connection between that and like the way that Ryoko's character like end up playing out, if it was just that, I think that the show would have more leg to stand on. But yeah, the fact that like Shinichi has 100 girlfriends that all get fucking brutalized definitely makes it a lot more questionable. That is not to say that I don't think that the romance element doesn't work. I do like, kind of along these lines, one of my criticisms, that I do like Murno's character, like as far as a tension of the show, like as far as that kind of will they, won't they, is Shinichi gonna be like pushing her away through his actions? Are the things that are changing him like irreconcilable with like the relationship they had before? Those are interesting questions. So I like them, and I want, as part of the drama, I want that relationship to work. But I do wish we got to see more of her character develop.
Oh my God, yeah. No, absolutely. I think another big criticism that you can make of a lot of the female characters, Tamara Ryoko notwithstanding, is that their motivations are all fairly clear and you can understand what they're looking for, but they all still feel very hollow. Like there's a lot of drama and interesting things, especially with his girlfriend, that could be fleshed out. She walks through a hall of her classmates' corpses, and that is not thoroughly explored. She makes occasional references to it, but in doing so, it almost feels glib. Like, we all walk through the corpses of our classmates. What are you doing? That's all you're going to say about it? You're not going to deal with what she's going through? This is a whole thing. You have a character here who has just survived one of the most traumatic events a human can live through. That's it?
Yeah, I'm honestly of two minds about this, because I do agree and like was actively thinking about this a lot. On the other hand, I do think there is something to be said for like protagonist vision and that feeling of, you know, being so wrapped up in your own shit that you kind of ignore other people who are obviously hurting. I don't think that the show does enough with this either way.
I mean, that is a theme that the show does get into, but as you were literally about to say before I cut you off, that it does not do enough with it either way, because they do make a mention of it. Like, I have to get myself out of this and I have to stop letting the people around me die and stop having consequences and start realizing that there are other people around me. And then it kind of just doesn't really go back on that.
Yeah, I do think this is one of the reasons I like the ending, and that I think the ending does some work to like make that element of their relationship more pronounced, that like these are people who in some ways like their relationship is centered in hurt. Because one of the things that bothered me about the relationship until the ending, where it became a little more clear that what we were doing was that, like, if we're talking about like the trauma angle, the fact that like, and, you know, like, obviously, like, in plot, it's justified as, like, Migi wants to protect his existence and will gut anyone Shinichi, like, tells about him. But, like, I think that in terms of, like, the emotional impact of that story and, like, that feeling of, again, is this person still going to love me even though I'm a monster, that element I think would have worked a lot better if like he had actually told her about Migi sooner, not like super soon, you know, we need to have that distance, but like the fact that kind of gets all saved for the end when Migi comes back and saves her. Well, I'm glad that like I feel more comfortable with that relationship, knowing that like that is eventually a bridge that get crossed. But as far as like that was one thing that was kind of off-putting to me, is like, man, just fucking tell her at this point. Jesus Christ, like she already knows so much. Like, what are you waiting for?
I mean, I think to kind of change gears, part of the reason that I think that her relationship with Shinichi, and I'm sorry, I know I just keep calling her or the girlfriend, I cannot remember her name. I know it's similar to Mukuro.
It's Murano.
Murano. All I could think about, though, is Mukuro, as in Mukuro Ikusaba, the 16th student lying dormant somewhere within the school. And that's a Danganronpa reference for all you out there. So that's why I've just been trying to not say it, because I know I'm going to say Mukuro instead. So just putting that out there. So I like Murano because I think that she does a lot to really ground the story, because she crops up usually after we get an element of heightened reality, essentially, where the world has gone to shit and there are monsters and everyone's dying and losing their mind. And here she comes to be like, hey, we're still around, though. It's not just about these monsters, it's about humanity and the rest of us. And so I do agree with Jackson that like there is a bunch of protagonist vision that I think is effective throughout the story, but it's unfortunate that when you look at these characters, you also go, well, that could be interesting. I kind of want to see some of that. So like these characters serve to ground Shinichi and ground the story and bring us back to this is also a slice of life story in a weird way. It's just it's a weird juxtaposition, which is basically what everything about this show is.
The side characters, I mean, Murano's the most blatant example, and she gets a little more development than most of the other people. But in general, the side characters are like good enough, understandable enough that you get it. But in a lot of cases, you feel like there's more. You want to see more, so you feel it.
So we should talk about Kana then, right?
Let's before we talk about Kana, I want to mention a few things because before we dive into more like criticisms, which we're about to do, with the side characters, I think sometimes this works out in the show's favor. I think that Shinichi's relationship with his parents, both of them, there is enough there that you kind of understand what his parents are like as people and how that impacts their relationship with each other, but they do not take up more of the story than they need to. And I think that works really well, especially, again, particularly in anime, and if we're grading it on that curve, and just young adult fiction, generally speaking, honestly. Like, American young adult fiction gets this criticism a lot, too.
Looking directly at you, Disney Pixar.
Parents are not around, and not even, like, not around as in the story, like, they literally aren't in the story. Like, they don't matter. Like, your high school age protagonist may as well just be running around, and if they are there, their role in the story is so perfunctory that they might as well not be. And so I like that this story, like, his parents are characters. Like, you do understand enough of their, like, dynamics with each other and enough of their psychology, and then that family dynamic gets flipped around really quickly, and I think that's really effective. And similarly, before we move on to Kana, the other thing that I wanted to praise about the show was that one thing that I really like is that you kind of feel as the story goes on how a lot of the high school stuff sort of falls away as Shinichi gets like deeper and deeper into the world. And he starts like skipping class, and like the teacher's like, "Hey, if you're not gonna pay attention, you may as well leave," and he just fucking does.
God, such a power move. I love that scene.
But what I love even more is that, like, in a lot of shows like this, particularly in anime, where like you have a character who's kind of delinquent, I guess, for lack of a better word, there is no consequences for it. I love that in the epilogue, Shinichi is like left behind and like studying for fucking entrance exams because he was too busy fighting fucking parasites to like be worried about college. Like it's a little thing, but like not a lot of other shows do that.
Like, that is what makes the show so great, is just how much little bits of humanity and reality it has. And I think that's why these characters, despite the fact that they are very, I mean, they're flat, for lack of a better word. They have the motivation, but like they're not really super well rounded. They feel very real because they're not fully fleshed out characters, but there's enough there that you can see the depth and imagine what the rest of it looks like. And that's how the world is. Like, flat's wrong. They're not flat. They're thin. They're thin.
There's enough there for you to enjoy what's going on in the story, but also like just enough not there to make you wish for certain characters that there was more.
Kana.
So let's get into this then.
So Kana is the epitome of this because she is a character who can sense parasites. She doesn't know that she's sensing parasites. She thinks she's sensing Shinichi. Wow, I feel like I just said a bunch of S's there, and I'm so worried how that sounded on audio. So she can sense parasites, but she thinks she senses Shinichi. And so, being that she can only sense this one person, or so she believes, I am so cognizant of my S's now, Jesus Christ.
She sells seashells by the seashore, Shinichi.
Right, yes. And so while Shinichi is selling these seashells by the seashore, she is finding that she thinks that she... All right, I'm fucking done. I'm out. So Kana is positive that she can sense Shinichi and only Shinichi, and this means that they have this like fabled connection and they are soulmates. And I get it. Like, that is not that big of a jump for her to make. You know, when you can when you think you can only sense one person, and like you have reliably proven that you can sense this person, I mean, what else are you going to do? Especially when you're in high school, you know? Like, you're young, you're in love, or so you think, and you're positive that all this stuff is going on. Why is Kana hanging out with Mitsuo? What's Kana's deal? What does she do? What is any of her? Like,
see, this is the thing, right? I think Kana's the perfect example because there is a thread of an idea to the fact that she hangs out with Mitsuo and is kind of a delinquent, right? And the fact that you could see it as that, based on that, this idea that she is kind of self-destructive and like attracted to like danger and like attracted to people who are not good for her, attracted to attracted to parasites in a very like literal sense. There's that thread of an idea that is maybe something that maybe is a meaningful statement, but as it is, as you say, it's just a thread. It's just the germ of an idea. It's not developed into anything one way or the other.
And so when she dies, you're kind of like, oh wow, that's sad. Alexa, play Despacito. That's right. That, speaking of things that are dated, the second that they happen, that's like a 3-year-old meme, but fuck it, baby. I mean, that's the vibe. Like, it is like, oh no, she died. Okay, I don't really have a strong attraction to this woman. I get her whole deal with Shinichi, but like I don't care enough about her to care that she dies. I don't. This impacts Mitsuo, and we see the impact on Mitsuo, but even then, we don't know enough about Mitsuo for us to really care about it, especially because Mitsuo just vanishes after this.
Kana's kind of the perfect example in that, like, her role in the story is basically to be another, like, drop in the bucket that is like the emotional dam of Shinichi bursting in that scene where Tamura Ryoko gives him the baby and like gives her life to protect her baby and go against her parasitic nature, which is a great scene. I fucking was tearing up during that scene. But it does illustrate kind of this show's problems with women, and that a lot of the women of Shinichi's life just serve to make him more punished Shinichi, which also is literal because he's got like a scar on his head that looks like the horn that Punished Snake has, and he's missing an arm during that part because Migi's gone, and I couldn't stop thinking about that. I also couldn't stop thinking about Revolver Ocelot's Liquid Snake arm while I was watching this. Out! Get out of my mind, Migi!
This show is also just it's a wonderful, wonderful show, but it is also endlessly memeable, just throughout the entire thing. So, for an example of that, I was thinking a lot about the music in the show, and aside from the weird dubstep stuff, all I have to say about it is that it's absolutely wonderful. There's some very good stuff in it. You can feel some Annihilation vibes with some like weird low synth that's just kind of disquietingly unsettling. They fight a dude named Miki who has like this, and they go on like this goofy ass 70s cop chase scene, and like there's like this sound effect going on the entire time. It sounds like a 70s cop chase scene, and then it switches when the fact that Miki is not 3 parasites but 5 parasites working together, and the head switch into Goto, and like the music changes into far more Castlevania or John Carpenter vibes. But at the time, I could not remember what Goto's name was. So I wrote down that we have some Castlevania music for Five Guys Burgers and Fries. And Sam suggested the alternate title of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, which is probably better if I'm being honest.
Oh no. Oh my god.
The Goto fight rules, by the way, just as an aside. Like, Goto is a fucking crazy ass dude, and I love that. His whole thing.
Goto is so fucking good. And actually, the Goto's a good opportunity because, like, sort of the, like, with that boss fight at the end, after Shinichi and Migi, like, reunite and, like, they're making that decision whether or not to put him down, whether they have a right to do that, like, just because he's dangerous to humans. I'm gonna go on the fucking record, and I actually think that this show is the reason that, like, I get so tilted by the humans are the disease, global warming is the virus trope that I've complained about 1 billion times on the show by now.
This show, before you get into this, like toves that line where I could feel your like getting all heckly from like miles away. I'm like, oh, it's so close. It's so close to the thing that Jackson hates. And then it goes, just kidding, and like falls in line.
No, because that's the thing. That's the thing, is that, like, yes, it does help that me and the show align, like, as far as I can tell, like, from what it's outright states ideologically in this regard, like, 100%. And, like, that the conclusion that they ultimately come to, that, and it's really, I think it's really great just the character beat that Migi is the one who convinces Shinichi to do this, as they kind of meet in the center of, like, human and Parasyte. And that, like, I think that the reason I get so tilted by that trope is because this show did it so fucking well, and every other show is a goddamn pretender. And like the fact that it actually engages with those questions, that there are characters who do have different points of view on this, humans, parasites, each one landing on sort of a different spot, and they just examine this issue of like human-caused environmental catastrophe in such a really like nuanced and intricate way, and that like what Shinichi ultimately decides is like, yeah, maybe humans, like the parasites would be good to like thin the herd for other animals, and like maybe humans are kind of a destructive race, but I'm not a fucking animal, and there is no God, and the earth is a rock, so bye. And I'm like, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I really like this too, especially because like it starts to almost challenge like we want to save the world, but it's only for ourselves. And then it's like, yes, but it's still saving the world.
No, exactly. Like it examines it from every angle, and like no side of the debate seems like inherently ridiculous. Like I'm being a little facetious with my like, there is no God, like edgy. But like the fact that we do have that the mayor who, you're led the whole show to think that he is a parasite, pushing like parasite feeding grounds, parasite rights. And like, because, the show kind of takes this existentialist stance of like the earth is just a rock, and like, the interplay of like species like using each other for food doesn't have any real like objective morality to it. Like he actually ends up coming out like pretty much as like with that framework as reasonable as anyone else. Like that's one of the things that makes the twist shocking. Like not that I'm sitting here condoning like this idea that we're going to make a haven for aliens to feast upon us in real life, but the fact that the show can make me consider that person's point of view without making me go on a 3-hour rant about it in the Godzilla episode. It's really something.
I was just talking about that episode and how everyone hated us for it, but we will live in infamy on that one.
I stand by everything I said, and I stand by how much time I spent talking about that fucking stupid speech in PowerPoint.
You know what? I'm right there with you on that one. I hated that so fucking much.
But yeah, this is so much better. This is just treated with so much more nuance. Like, I think that the show does have an ideology, but it leaves a lot of room for like you to challenge it and like come to your own conclusions based on what the characters have sort of seen and felt and experienced. It's great. It's fucking great.
The show presents its themes, but doesn't present its conclusions. I think that is what can be said of it. And so like throughout this entire show, there might be whole swaths where you're like, I'm not really picking up anything here, despite the fact that there are still definitely themes that the show is presenting, but the show does such a good job at feeling incredibly personal to every person who watch it, because certain beats are going to hit differently for other people and you're going to get different ideas out of it. And it doesn't ever come down and be like, hey, you dum-dum, you missed that I was making this point, so here's my grand thesis at the end, and here's how it all comes together. And instead it's just like, here's some ideas for you to marinate on. You might miss some of them. You might pick up on some that aren't there, that I, the author, didn't intend. That's fine. I have my ideas. You might not agree with them. Think about why. Here's alternative ideas. And I really like that. And I'm gonna take this as a time to rope it into. I teased Jackson a little bit. I have a final little bit.
I've been waiting for this because I've been wanting to talk about the ending and why I think it works so well, and I think we're gonna get into that with this, but I have no idea what's coming. So like I'm ready.
So here's the subtlety that I really appreciate of this author. At the end, our murder boy shows back up. Our serial killer from before shows back up and captures Murano, not Mukuro, Murano. Away.
There are more than 16 students at that school, though the rate with Parasyte showing up, maybe there won't be soon.
Wow, they've got a higher death toll than Monokuma. Oh man, we make the taking references too much on this podcast. We alienate our audience so much.
I mean, to be fair, we're talking about fucking Parasyte this week. It's
That's
an anime.
fair. I mean, you know what? This, if there was ever a time, here's the cross section. But yeah, so he captures Murano, and Shinichi comes up, and like there's this whole kerfuffle, and it ends with 2 dead bodies. The murder boy on the ground and Shinichi with Murano on top of him. And 2 people run up and they go, oh my God, there's 3 bodies up here. And Shinichi's like, 3? What is he talking about? And Murano goes, they're probably talking about us. I posit you, why would they be talking about them? I posit you that murder boy got killed. I posit you that either Shinichi, in the heat of the moment, accidentally killed Murder Boy, which is a very interesting condemnation given everything else that has been going on in this series and his unwillingness to kill humans until it came down to the wire. Or Migi, who we know is somewhat conscious in this moment, because in what Shinichi did was he blocked with his left hand and got a knife in his left arm and swung with his right. Migi gave him a little bit of an extra juice there and killed Murder Boy for him.
Yeah.
Either way, I think that's very interesting. And I think that's something, because like the show doesn't ever say it's the murder boy who's dead. But I think the language of the final scene very subtly says the third body is the murder boy, because there's no reason for them to think that 2 people on top of each other is just one dead body. That doesn't make a lick of sense to me. I was marinating on this for like 20 minutes after the show ended. I was walking the dogs being like, why the fuck would they say 3? And like they even bring that up. I definitely think that Murder Boy died there. And I think it's very interesting whether Migi did it or Shinichi did it, because it very much plays into everything else in the series. I'm very interested in that.
And like whether Migi or Shinichi did it is that like sort of the implication. Like I think you can interpret Migi sort of disappearing into like the great dreamer sleep in a few different ways. I think one way that you could reasonably say is that like at this point Migi and Shinichi have basically like functionally like synthesized into one being at this point. And so and like in that sense it might not matter. But no, I hadn't really thought about this, and I think you're right, and I think it makes this ending only even better. It's
so good. I don't know whether this is like an intentional element of it, but this is entirely my headcanon from here forward, is that serial killer Murder Boy was definitely killed in this moment in either a fit of passion for Murano, which makes sense given everything else that had been leading up to this point, despite Shinichi's unwillingness to see humanity killed, especially given Murder Boy's spiel at the end there. Or Migi did it, which is interesting just because Migi went against Shinichi's wishes, but it was to save someone other than Shinichi or himself in that moment, and it was actually there to help Shinichi save Murano. Or they're homogenized, whereas then it's a combination of both of those things, and it's interesting in its own right. I love this ending. The more I think about it, the better I like it.
No, I mean the ending is so fucking good, and like I get why it's off-putting to people, but because the comparison that I keep making is that a lot of people have the same complaint. It's very similar to The Dark Knight in a lot of ways, and that like you have the what would, what most people consider to be the climax, which is, when Batman catches the Joker and when Shinichi, kills Goto. And in both cases, it's a really good fight. It's a really good climax. It's, like you could, another movie or another show could theoretically end there. But like, then it goes a little further and has sort of like, I call it like an epilogue fight. And that, we have our final confrontation with just this serial killer, like not big bad Goto. And some people see that as anticlimactic. But yeah, like you really do have to be paying attention to like the characters and the themes and to really get a lot out of it. Because I feel very much the same way about that last encounter with Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight. Like I think
spoilers for The Dark Knight, I guess. Everyone's seen The Dark Knight. Who cares?
Yeah, like I feel very much the same way about that, and that, like, yes, although in terms of tension, like rising action of the story, like, you know, all that, you know, creative writing 101 jargon, it is not the final boss fight. It is not like the climax, but like the fact that we still have this smaller encounter that means so much to the characters, and we sort of see how, like, you know, in this like one last really extreme situation, their philosophies are tested one last time, and that's kind of like the ultimate impression. And that's one of the reasons I think that this ending does a lot for me to like make me feel all right with the ending of, like, you know, Shinichi and Murano running off into the sunset together, is that we do have that ending of like, there's no way Murano's like halfway down a building. There's no way she doesn't see, you know, Shinichi grow a tentacle to catch her. Like, the game is up at that point, and like the characters, through like what they've learned and through what they've gone through together, can actually communicate, and I feel good about them ending up together, and it's a good ending, and it has implications about how far Shinichi's come, that he's willing to apply this principle of like, I'm gonna be a solid snake Chad and like fight for who I care about, whether they're human or parasite, and fuck you, murder boy. Like, no, that's even better.
And it ends with him with a knife in his arm, and that's something that's distracting just in my own head, because I'm like, hey, how's that arm doing? You got a knife through it. You guys should probably go do something about that. I know you got some adrenaline, you pumping, but that's gonna hurt real soon.
I will say it is a little weird how, like, as far as the ending goes, the one thing that is weird, it's a little weird just how like sexually charged Shinichi and Murano are in that moment, like climbing on top of each other. Like, they seem ready to fuck on that pile of corpses.
I mean, I guess near-death experiences makes you want to experience life, and more than a few things have positive that sex is the opposite of death. So
like I get it, but geez, guys, at least take the knife out of your arm first.
It's like, get off on the danger of the situation. You don't understand.
I mean, I guess when your teenage years were that fucked up, you kind of have to.
You're not wrong.
Oh, do we want to do some last memes? Do we have any other major things we want to say?
I don't think so. I'm good. I mean, I've talked a lot about this. As I said, I could spend a long time talking about the body horror implications of it, but I would just ramble through it right now because I don't have a cohesive through line, and like each section kind of has their own little bits of implications. So I'm not going to do that, but like, go read my article and then make your own conclusions.
You'll be thinking about the article a lot if after you watch this, or if you read it first, whatever fucking order. It's go read it. But I just wanted two last memes, one of which I'll probably upload to my YouTube channel for people to see. Sean, it was that video I sent you. Which, like, it's so funny because that comes like hot off the heels off of like one of the most powerful scenes in the show, and like, it doesn't make any sense at all, like, even thematically.
No. No. Context, not to give away the joke, is Jackson is riffing on when Ghost Kana shows up and taps Murano on the shoulder for some reason.
Yeah, it's I'll upload the video. It'll be in the show notes. It'll be a good bit.
Yeah.
But the other good meme that we were memeing about even way back when is how, like, when Shinichi and Murano do have sex, it's like actually really well done, and that like it feels like an important development to those like characters' relationship, and like and it's not shot in a way that's super over the top or creepy and gratuitous until they stare into each other's eyes and sparkle like a Twilight vampire.
Oh my god. All right, my one meme, my one new meme aside from Five Guys and Mickey Mouse's Clubhouse that I do just have to bring up is as Shinichi is sitting there, Goto is coming towards him, and he's like, I have to give up. There is nothing left for me to do. No, there's one chance, and if I don't take that, then I have no chance, so I might as well. And I had to pause the show because I was laughing so hard, because in my head, all I could think about is the scene from The Office where it's, you miss every shot, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott, Shinichi.
No, it's, and that's the wonderful thing about the show is that like it does have genuinely like so much thematic richness and depth that make it like wonderful, and like there's so much well done drama and action to like keep you involved in the story. But like Metal Gear Solid, there's sometimes you just have to pause and like send your friend who is also watching it a fucking meme because what you're seeing is making you cackle. I actually have a question. Speaking of am I a monster?
Yes, you have not stopped making Metal Gear references throughout this episode. You are indeed a monster.
Fair. But separate from that, this time did you get like a dark laugh when Shinichi yeets that dog into the bin?
Oh my god, kinda, yeah.
Okay, good. Because like it is like I think it's really effective. Like this in particular, like I'm not just memeing about. I think that like it is shocking and it's kind of like an incredulous because I forgot that he did that. And like you kind of feel like Murno is obviously horrified, and Shinichi's like, yeah, it's like meat, like shaped like a dog, like it's not a dog anymore, like whatever. And rationally, I'm like, oh yeah, he's kind of right, but also like you can't just do that to your girlfriend.
You can't do that. Period. Like that flies in the face of thousands of years of humanity's traditions.
Right. But I did just get like, because it's pretty shocking, but also like. He does just eat it in the bin. So, all right, I'm glad I wasn't the only one who got like a chuckle, like oh no, like that kind of.
Oh, it's dark. It's very it's very weird. It's so jarring that like I think you can only laugh, like especially when you know it's coming. Because like I know Sam was like, oh god, oh no, Shinichi, no, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? But like when you know it's coming, you're kind of like, oh god, oh no, why?
And God, I actually do really like the scene because I do like that. Even though he's further becoming a demon, he takes it out of the garbage and gives it a barrel. Is like, well, I mean, I don't really get it, but like this is just the way people do things. I guess there's something about that gets to me. I don't know.
I mean, the whole show is this juxtaposition of stupid fucking memes and really heartfelt great moments, a weird pacing and perfect pacing, bizarre characters and the best characters. It walks this tightrope so immaculately that like you know that a stiff breeze would fuck up the whole thing, and it never does.
Genuinely one of my favorite shows of all time.
Watch this. Also watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. That's my recommendation. Just because I like FMA Brotherhood a whole fucking lot. And it deals with actually kind of similar themes of like, it not similar themes, but like broad strokes, big questions. Hey, we should take a look at humanity and reevaluate type of stuff.
Yeah, I've only watched the 2003 version, but even in that one, yeah, it had a lot of richness in that way. So
Full Metal Alchemist in general, great series. Deal with that. Just a side recommendation, just because I love FMA. I'm Sean Mekinda. Find me on Twitter at Sean_Mekinda. I have mostly been posting about skateboarding there, weirdly. I guess if you don't know me, that probably seems weird, but I've been skateboarding for a long time and I'm just kind of getting into it now. So check that out if you want it. I sometimes tweet about movies and stuff too.
And I'm Jackson Keller, not in fact a human baby, but a human boy, a grown boy. You can find me on Twitter at Jackson J. Keller, where, and I quote, I only ever see you tweet about hogs. Thank you, dear Michael.
If you want to keep in contact with the podcast, that's at BADH_cast on Twitter. We mostly tweet about like updates and new episodes and stuff like that. It's not a hugely active account, but you know what? Maybe you want to know when a new episode comes out, or if we have to delay an episode or something like that. If you want to support the podcast in a very meaningful way, or if you want to yell at Jackson and I, That's at patreon.com/BADHcast. $1 a month gets you access to our Discord where you can come yell at Jackson and I very directly, and we will talk to you and chat with you and talk to you about pretty much anything. I spent a little bit of time talking about A Color Out of Space this weekend just because someone's like, hey, I watched this movie. What do you guys think of it? It's a good movie. Go watch it. $5 a month gets you access to all that and our backlog of bonus episodes. We've got a bunch of really great episodes on that backlog. Go listen to them if you are a $5 patron. $10 a month gets you access to everything that I said before, as well as the ability to request bonus episodes. Someone has already unknowingly requested their bonus episode for this month. You'll know it when you see it. It also gets a little...
is dead.
It also gets a little something something.
Thank you so much, Travis, Julia, Pat, Mom, Aunt Summer. We're back. Dinosaurs, we're back in the patron club.
Fuck yeah.
We're here.
We're back. We're going to be going strong again. That was a good break, but we're coming back stronger than ever. Also, thanks to Loads of Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide, alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go support them however you can. Buy their music, stream their music, whatever you got to do. Support artists in general right now. It's very hard for anyone to be making a living, especially artists, theater people, all that good stuff. Go support them however you absolutely can. Also, thanks to 25videoslatersite.com. Not only am I a writer there occasionally, I also do a lot of their audio editing stuff, but this isn't about me. This is about them because it's a bunch of really talented people doing a bunch of really talented writing that you should absolutely go check out. They're great people. Next week, we are going to be talking about Bill and Ted 1 and 2. I'm super excited to get into it. I haven't seen these movies in a long, long time.
It's gonna be excellent.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go